session. We have with us Dr. Ajay Garg, Senior Director, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, for a special keynote address, followed by a panel discussion. Our moderator for the session will be Mr. Sambhav Jain, founder, FanPay. And now introducing our panelists, we have with us Mr. Vishnu Moda, co-founder, Hoichoi, Mr. Shankar Vadadi, founder and mentor, iLent, and Mr. Abhishek Sinha, co-founder, Eco.in. I would now request Dr. Garg to kindly give his keynote address and begin the session.
And thank you and welcome to my co-panelists. Let me also welcome the audience in this virtual mode in which of the present situation that is there. And I hope that the situation goes off very soon, and the only hope that we all have to do. Of that, what we have created is that this virtual medium has become a key enabler in which we remain connected. The topic for today is that system of startups in India and what are the missing links today. So in this context, let's understand.
So there seems to be some audio issue at your end.
Aparna, I'm not.
Yes, sir. Now
hear me clearly.
Please continue. Yes, sir. Now we can.
Okay. So, yeah, the issue on hand is that how do we create a India as compared to the existing infrastructure that we have. And let me start off with the fact that India has more than 40,000 startups as of date, of which more than 12,000 growing at around 19% year on year. At the same time, what we a substantial shift from in the startup ecosystem where the deep tech space is growing faster as compared to normal e-commerce and other such businesses or digital businesses which were there, and if at all these digital businesses are there, they want to have more infusion of emerging technologies into that, whether it's an AI, ML, IoTs, and other such technologies which are fast growing in space because of the increasing internet speed and that have become made it a key enabler for deep technology. At the same time, what we have there are two key starking issues that have actually the last 1 year or so. The first has been the present pandemic, where the human-to-human trust has taken a hit. And technology has to actually bridge the gap to build such trust. And that has created a key market for deep tech digital technologies. The second important thing is that what is happening on the global supply chain front is that there is an evolving concept of trusted partners vis-a-vis labor and the best rate. So the shift has been that the blocks have been broken up further under the WTO, where there have trusted partners, and India, because of its very buoyant democracy, policy frameworks for in global context, because of a demographic is a key trusted partners to many in the especially in the countries in the West. So this has created an opportunity where India finds itself that there is a hope that to offset the economic distress that has been created due to COVID, the deep tech by the startups can actually offset that distress, and India can come back to its very vibrant rates in next 1.5 years. And that's the main hope, and that's the very big advantage where the deep tech ecosystem, especially the startup ecosystem, can provide as a key enabler for the economy to revive back. And for this to happen, the startup ecosystem needs a major support, and government has realized the fact that this major support has to come in whatever way possible to make these very deep tech technologies to enabler for future economic growth. Now let's understand that where do we stand in the deep tech ecosystem and what are the missing gaps to make this system more successful. From successful technologies to successful corporates is the key requirement which is ecosystem to considerably contribute to the economy, and that's important. So what we have right now, we have robust, frugal in nature, solving problems on the ground, and that is what the tech startup system has provided as of date. What is missing is that how do we create these successful solutions on ground into technology, into corporates of the future, which can have substantive economic models around it. What we have seen in the last 1 year is that there has been an addition of around 1,600 deep tech companies. There has been an addition of 12 unicorns that have come to create a total of 38 unicorns in India, which making in India is the third biggest ecosystem concerned after US and China. But many of these unicorns have left Indian shores and have established their centers outside India because there was a lack of rupee capital that investments in these such startups, and they were looking for foreign funds left. So vibrance provide them substantive seed capital, substantive stage one fundings, and stage two fundings, and that too in rupee capital is important for this startup ecosystem to grow. The second, lack of understanding, especially in the MSME sector, use of deep tech ecosystem as enabler for improving efficiency and productivity has led to creating lesser market opportunities for them as compared to what is a possibility on ground is. The third important thing is in regards to them being considered for taking money from the market, money investors in form of IPOs, companies still do not have their books as positive revenue flows and still can be considered as loss-making entities, and that's why there is the SEBI does not allow them. You does not used to allow them to float an IPO, and because of which the public money was not flowing into the ecosystem. The last thing which I want to touch upon is that the world investment ecosystem globally, whether it is from Canada and many other services, has been driven by pension funds and public funds, public sales, which have been the key enablers for creating massive investments into the deep tech industry. In India, because of the regulatory challenges and because of the lack of confidence in venture capital ecosystem, the flow from the pension funds, the provident funds, and even the banks have been substantially low for the rupee capital ecosystem to be created. Now I come to what we as in all this aspect. The first key issue that I talked about is about the infrastructure. Research, standardization, and test beds for them to actually make viable product solutions possible. Under the national policy on software products and the national policy on electronics, which India came up in 2019, these infrastructures have been created. My ministry, that is the Ministry of Electronics and IT, created what we call it as a single window accelerator, the mighty startup hub, interconnecting all the dots that are possible for creating a vibrant startup ecosystem. They have now partnered with more than 12,000 startups, more than 400 incubators, and testing and other facility to provide a single window facility as far as infrastructure is concerned. To top it up, we have come up with a number of financial support policies, whether it has been scheme for STPIs, an array of 25 targeted sectoral center of excellences, or the Sashak scheme, which we came up to provide seed support to offset the distress due to COVID. These have been some of the financial supports under the Mighty Startup Hub to actually support the Indian deep tech startup ecosystem. As far as seed capital is concerned, you'll be happy to know that up with 1,000 crore seed capital to be provided to more than 20,000 startups for them to actually find initial funding supports that is very crucial for them to accelerate. Now, when it comes to the rupee capital, in very advanced stages of the discussions to create a 5,000 crore venture fund, a fund of funds, in which the game changer is that whereas the government will be investing 1,000 crores, we are trying to activate through policy changes that the 4,000 crores come from financial institutions, the pension funds, and the banks. And we are having very, very concerned regulatory authorities to make it possible. So understand, 5,000 crore from this ecosystem, creating a 25,000 crore startup fund, venture fund for acceleration will be the game changer in the respect that it does two things. A large rupee capital into the system, and at the same time makes it possible for the pension and other such funds to actually participate in the venture will actually of that will the market access from the government has been a missing link. The government financial rules does not allow small companies to actually the government as in their procurement policies of solutions in that respect. The GEM, there has been a special window that has been created on the government e-marketplace for startups to actually bid for government. On top of it, we are trying to create a procurement policy in which an escrow fund from each central government ministries can be targeted towards buying it from innovative startups. The second important about a series of challenges that the government of India did in the last 3-4 months. When COVID came, conferencing became a new normal for doing meetings and interconnecting with us. So there was concerns around many of the foreign VC platforms in terms of privacy and data protections, and as well as the opportunity that India with its 1.3 billion people have created for such players. You must have known that the growth pattern of Zoom has been phenomenal during the COVID period. So we realized there exists a opportunity around the video conferencing facility that can be created from India. We ran a challenge during the deepest of lockdown, identifying an Indian VC solution, and you will be happy to know that all company from Kerala, Lippi, actually won this and as solution for the government, and that is on a paid basis. If India needs a good quality and quantity drinking water for all, which is food for first Independence Day speech in the present tenure, then for monitoring the good quality and quantity drinking water pan India requires a solution of a magnitude which can be monitored single desktop, and that is the only solution we look at as provide such solution. We came up with a water challenge and where we are identifying IoT solutions for monitoring drinking water, and that too from Indian ecosystem. Then the COVID vaccine has come to the country. But if the vaccine has to be distributed in a transparent and efficient manner and has to be monitored at each and every, so we need a good COVID vaccination distribution management system. The COVID challenge, which is ongoing right now on the Mighty Startup Hub, is trying to identify such solution from Indian tech startup ecosystem. These challenges have become an alternate method. We are actually different, not actually in which the GFR doesn't challenge them. We are also working very close that the GFR rules are modified so that young startups with very small revenue generations having no prior on ground can also provide solutions for government in terms of procurement. These are some of the key things that the government has come up. The financial propositions is as regards to providing loans, collaterals have been given away with it. Banks have been specially instructed that they should not look at collaterals in SMEs. And so, whatever regulatory challenges that a vibrant tech startup ecosystem has right now, government is well aware of it. We are trying to find solutions around it, and we will actually seek all your support to make Indian tech startup ecosystem a great success and a future in economic growth. Thank you once again for you.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for the talk. Mr. Jain, I would request you to please continue with the discussion.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, sir, for that insightful, uh, session on the whole regulatory space that we're going through. I agree with the fact that we need such advancements in the deep tech, because that is what is going to replace the human to human interaction and trust, right? That is what is helping us to go through these times. And it was super interesting to know that out of 40,000 startups in India, like 12,000 startups are growing 19% year on year. So I think India is going to be the place where the next is going to be the next place for startups to grow. So yeah, would like to thank you for that, and would like to welcome everyone else to the panel discussion. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sambhav Jain. I'm the co-founder of FamPay, and we are building India's first neobank for teenagers. So I today we have as co-panelists we have Mr. Vishnu, who's the founder of Hoichoi, an Indian on-demand video streaming platform. We have Mr. Shankar Varadi, who is the founder of Island. It's an online P2P lending marketplace connecting lenders and borrowers. And we have Mr. Abhishek Sinha, who's the co-founder of Eco.in, which is a cash-based business platform enabling merchants to service cash customers with online transaction needs. So, would like to start with you, Mr. Vishnu. Can you talk more about your business and what you're building at Hoichoi?
Thanks, Ambhav. Am I audible properly?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Hoichoi started about 3.5 years back as a video streaming platform, an OTT platform meant for entertainment content, long form entertainment content. We are a subscription platform. We at the moment focus only on one language, which is Bengali. Uh, we dub our content in a lot of other languages, which we distribute through some of our partners. But predominantly, we are a films and originals video streaming platform. Uh, yeah, that's a little bit about us.
That's great. I think the streaming and content industry is already booming. Like everyone talking about Netflix and everybody using Prime and everything. I think Hoichoi is a great place. So, are you focusing specifically on Bengali content?
Yeah, at the moment. So yeah, I mean both sides. I mean, so India and Bangladesh. So we've got a setup in Bangladesh also. Bangladesh is a market. If you think about it, it's a country of 180 million people who only speak Bengali as a language. So that's an extremely important language for us also.
Right, right, right. That's amazing. Like, would like to come back to this and discuss on the policy changes in this. Um, Mr. Shankar, can you tell us more about what you're building at Island? Sir, you're on mute.
Okay. So, Island, thank you for getting me on this panel, Shivani and Sambhav. Uh, so, Island was the first P2P lending platform in the country. So, we launched P2P lending before not many people had even heard about it, including the RBI. So, when we first approached RBI with this P2P lending platform model, they said, "Why do you want to do that? Why don't you just set up an NBFC?" Starting from there, 3 years later, RBI coming out with proper regulations for the P2P industry. So it's been a long ride, and particularly being a very heavily regulated sector, primarily from the RBI. See, the challenges have been numerous, and traversing the path has been fairly interesting. And the pandemic, one way to look at it is either an opportunity, or it's leading to fairly adverse situations. Let's see how the regulators will cope with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. I remember I just like both me and Kush, my co-founder, we graduated from IT Roorkee just last year. So before thinking about FamPay, we always used to discuss a lot of ideas, a lot of products, and I remember Island being one of them, where we were discussing like how P2P lending is so interesting, right? Where all the people are coming together and investing a little bit of money and getting returns. So it's quite an amazing concept, and we were quite fascinated with it. Um, so yeah, Mr. Abhishek, coming to you, what I would like to know what you're building at Eco.in.
Thanks, Sambhav. Echo started way back in 2007, and so it's been a little longer than 13-year-old journey for us. And when we started, there were no smartphones, so we were trying to build, interface on feature phones to help people in the low and moderate income segments to be able to do digital payments. So it's been a long journey for us. For now, what we are building is a platform of tools and opportunities for gig entrepreneurs. And that's really the base we have been working with all along. And one very big demand for or need for this gig entrepreneur is access to capital. And they have this challenge that their bank statements don't have a lot of transactions. So we are trying to make sure that we are generating enough transaction data and alternate data for underwriting to happen for them and for them to get access to capital. So that's what Echo is into these days.
Great, wonderful.
That's super interesting. So we are here to discuss like how different regulatory policies are a key enabler for the whole startup ecosystem, right? And what has helped us so far in terms of policies or what can be improved in the whole ecosystem. So Abhishek sir, like would like you to continue the discussion and would like to know what are the key policies that have been implemented or come into picture in the past few years that has helped your startup to grow or has been a key enabler for that.
So, few things have clearly changed the landscape. Not part of the policy, but smartphones and data has clearly changed. And data, of course, government has a lot of role to regulate data and to make sure that it is available at the lowest possible price points for the end consumer. And that's a big change. From 2014 onwards, we have been transitioning from feature phones to smartphones. The other big change, at least in the fintech space, has been the evolution of infrastructure like India Stack. And that has been a game changer. I remember that we used to source customers through a paper form. And now paper is completely eliminated from practically all of the processes at Echo. And even with low income customers, we are sourcing and we are acquiring these customers using completely digital methods and collecting their data completely digitally, including doing their KYC completely digitally. Of course, there was a setback when Supreme Court disallowed or banned eKYC using Aadhaar, I think in 2018. But that is getting revived, and I'm really looking forward to that. Just to conclude my point, I really want to thank Mr. Garg for his talk. Just one input as an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur in India since 2002, and while we did a great job when we look at numbers top down. I think there is a need for us now in the ecosystem, and especially when we want to accelerate the work on policy, to also start to look at data bottoms up, which is to look at the exclusions at every level. If we have close to 40 companies who are unicorns, then there are quite a few who didn't make it, who are probably would have made it because of they didn't make it because there was some lack of policy or some lack of capital or something which came into their way and disallowed that to happen. So I think it was very, very encouraging to hear the updates and the initiatives by the government. My only little small input is that the government can only initiate a mechanism where bottoms up metrics also start to get collected, and that will really help in bridging the gap and accelerating the work on the policy. So that's one input. And in the pandemic, one help which is needed again from the government is that it has really created challenges on the liquidity for a lot of companies, especially Echo. We are struggling through because of lack of liquidity. And one of the ways to ease liquidity is to be easy on us as far as the tax authorities are concerned. I think they are a little bit too tight in these times. And if
I think, and just adding to that, I think not just for companies, even if we talk about the ESOP policies, right? So I think that is a major setback that we need to work on as a country. So there's a tax that you have to pay at the time of exercising, but it's not still liquidated, right? So that becomes a major setback for other people to join startups, get ESOPs. They have to wait for liquidity events and other things. So I think there's a lot of scope there because of this, the tax implications. A lot of them do not look at ESOPs the way they should be looked at, right?
Completely. That is, by the way, it's a very good point you brought up, Sambhav, because that is may not be the one big reason, but it is an important reason for a lot of companies to change their domicile to either Singapore or US, because ESOP issuance becomes a lot more easier.
Right.
And I'm very happy that at least government is now tracking that metric of the number of companies which are changing their domicile, because then they will make the effort to figure out what are the reasons why this whole change in domicile is getting triggered, and they will try and address it.
Great inputs, Abhishek sir. Like moving on to Vishnu, Mr. Vishnu, what are the key policy changes that have happened in the past 2 to 3 years in the OTT space, which have helped you to grow?
No, I think I think policy changes have, especially, most of the internet bandwidth that we consume today is video in some way, shape, form, including this particular video conference. And obviously, in the case of OTT, having access to high quality, low cost bandwidth is an essential part of the ecosystem. Without that, we would not exist as a business for that matter. And I think the policy changes and the policy things that were done by the government maybe many years back in terms of democratizing, how bandwidth is made available, the quality of bandwidth that is made available, the cost at which it is made available, the taxes that the government is imposing on telcos and things like that, and ISPs for that matter. Streamlining those things, I think, had a way bigger impact than we would ever be able to imagine, especially in the case of video streaming, and that applies from everybody in the ecosystem. So that is one I can think of. Other than that, there is, as far as OTT is concerned, this is a very pertinent and evolving topic of discussion around content regulation, content privacy policy. We hear about the entire WhatsApp thing that has been going on. So I think it's becoming more and more pertinent and front and center issue around managing people's where is your data stored, where is your how are you be regulating and putting checks and balances so that data leaks are avoided, as we hear about every other day. How do we ensure that the content that we publish on our platforms is safe and is complying with all the rules that already exist in the country? In addition to that, what is the best way to ensure that children, etc., are not able to access content that they're not supposed to meet in some cases? And we're not mindful of that, and we're not doing anything that is going to hurt religious sentiments and unnecessarily flare up sentiments for some faction in a diverse country like India. And I think that's an evolving topic. I think within the ages of IMEI, we've had a lot of discussions as a part of the entertainment committees where we talk about self-regulation and kind of things that we want to put forth as proposals to the government in terms of how we can sort of ensure that checks and balances exist in the at least in the serious players in the ecosystem, which have the majority share of what people are watching today in the country.
Yeah. I feel that data privacy and the laws related to that become super important in your case. And as you mentioned that, how do we make sure that kids are not watching the content they're not supposed to watch, right? So as we are into the space where we're building products for teenagers, this is something that we come across every day. That what if our kids are buying a Netflix subscription and they are not just watching kids content, right? So
Sure.
how do we ensure that? I think the policies needs to be reworked there, and how do we verify the identity that someone watching is a kid or an adult? That is important. One
Sure.
other policy change, I think, not just for streaming platform, but businesses on subscription models will benefit from is. Um, so government recently moved their contactless and auto debit payments limit from 2,000 per transaction to 5,000. So they have
Sure.
increased this ticket size. So I think for subscription businesses with ticket sizes of more than 2,000, this will be
Absolutely.
easier for people to just link their debit cards and the auto debit will happen. And
Sure.
I think
Yeah, actually, the other one is also the UPI auto recurring that is being proposed and is in the works in
yeah,
some cases or the other. So I think we'll end up with a system where we'll have credit cards which will have recurring payments We will have debit cards, which already have a framework around eMatch, which will have recurring possibilities, obviously with user consent and user information front-ended. And I think UPI again is a game changer as far as the payment ecosystem is concerned. Again, I was leaving those out because I thought, it's such a pervasive thing now. We never think about life without UPI today.
Right.
It's a global model in a lot of ways. So having recurring as part of the flow of UPI again is a game changer in my opinion,
Yeah.
in making it the default method of people transacting on the internet.
I think, and if the ticket size is close to like 5,000 or something, it will cover
Yeah.
90% of the digital transactions. And
More than that, before you'll be surprised, maybe 99% for all.
yeah, so I think this policy is going to be game changer for all the business models.
Sure.
Great.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yes. So yeah, Mr. Shankar, coming to you, would like to understand what are the key policies that have made your business seamless in the past few years? What's going on in the lending space?
So, Sambhav, the fintech lending space per se, one want to refer to that as that. Uh, Even after 6 years of fintech lending starting in India, not many fintechs are profitable. So they require lots of funds to continue to keep the operations going. Hopefully, acquire enough number of customers or customer databases, which then makes them attractive to acquire for the customer life cycles. This is the model that has been going on in India.
Right.
Primarily, this has been going on elsewhere as well, but there's a little difference here because here in India we have multiple regulators. Right? So with RBI regulating NBFC lending, SEBI regulating all other market related activities. So the challenge for fintech lenders is the margins under which they operate. While we always say that we do not have an operational cost of, let's say, a conventional financial institution, neither do we also have the luxury of the arbitrage that they enjoy. Okay, so if a typical conventional NBFC is playing an arbitrage of 11 to 13%, a fintech lending company's gross will be around 3 to 4%.
Right.
If you plus cost of compliance, cost of compliance under the current regulation eats up a lot of effort and time. Now, I'm not asking that these things to be diluted. What I'm trying to say is, from day one, regulation against fintechs or for fintechs has been skewed against making them profitable anytime soon.
Right.
So unless I have a book size of 5,000 crores, or 3,000 crores, I'm not really looking to pay dividend to my shareholders at any time soon. And then my cost of funds is increasing every day. I'm raising funds either through a venture capitalist or a HNI network or friends and other sources, and then I'm giving away a chunk of equity trying to acquire more and more customers, thereby wherein I'll get some valuation at some point of time.
Right.
But finally, where are the exits in the fintech space?
So what do you feel is the major policy or space that the government needs to look into
I
and
think
bring
the
a major
government is
policy
caught
change?
between a rock and the hard place. Basically because when you're looking at consumer lending, you're essentially looking at lending money to individual customers who actually who actually make up a very significant vote bank. Okay, so any kind of outcry, on high lending rates there is bound to have a political effect. If you see the spate of lending apps that have been, lending micro lending to, these what you call payday loan people, and the arrests that have taken place in the last 3 to 4 weeks, primarily South, some Gurgaon, etc. Technically, they have not flouted any law. There is no interest rate cap. It's not their money.
Right.
But they've been booked under sections. I mean, I don't want to get into discussion that it's Chinese and, so on and so forth. The point is they've lent money and the consumer who has borrowed this money is very well aware of the charges.
Right. But talking about, let's say,
which they book. So now what happens is the regulation. Now, so I think 3 days back, RBI again constituted a committee to again regulate online lenders, these app-based lenders. So what is it going to do? Is it going to tell them that if you start even aggregating lending, then you need NBFC minimum capital guarantees, etc.? Or is it going to say you're not allowed to do it? Or is it going to put interest caps? Or is it going to say you can't use these ABC collection practices? Now, it's already said a lot of these things. For instance, the Fair Practice Code is already there in the RBI website, and all regulated entities are supposed to follow it. But who's enforcing it?
So RBI recently came up with a scale-based regulatory framework, right? That was specifically framed for NBFCs and on the auditing systems that follow. Do you think that this policy change is going to at least promote people who are new in the industry to start a fintech business? Or
See, if you look at the last 2 years, I mean, we'll take out last year because the pandemic really effectively nullified a whole lot of initiatives. But if you look at the previous 2 years data, the kind of fintechs that have come up in the knowledge space, not in the lending space. Either building great algorithms, qualitative credit decisioning models, AI-driven face recognition systems, etc., etc., etc. Now, these are all ecosystem partners to a fintech lending company. They by themselves do not constitute a business completely because they're facilitators. So if I am doing online lending, then I need a face recognition software to be incorporated into my entire algorithm. I need a credit decisioning model. So they're like ecosystem partners for me, but they're not the main component. So unless the main component is not strong, the ecosystem partners and the vendors don't ever become strong.
right. We've got a question from the attendees. So, in your point of view, what are the key ingredients that goes into having a successful startup? And this is for all the panelists. So, would like to start with Abhishek, sir. What are the key ingredients that goes into having a successful startup?
But it's difficult to answer this question because it's not referenced. And I
Successful startup is
speaking with somebody who's just about to start or has started. But 2-3 things are very, very important. I think at the end of the day, it is especially when we are trying to create intellectual property and we are trying to work with data-related technologies, having a really good A team is a must. So that's a must. Of course, you need to identify the right problem and solve it with the right product. That is also very important. But it is very important for Indian entrepreneurs to learn from scale which some of our Western counterparts have achieved. One very good playbook, which I encourage a lot of young entrepreneurs to follow, is the playbook of Android. And what really Google did with Android. You see, open sourcing a platform wasn't an act of benevolence. It was a very strategically thought out act to get massive scale. So whatever, let's say, Echo built way back in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, is that IP still to be protected? And if that IP is still, there is no relevance to protecting that IP, Echo and many other companies, many larger startups and companies out of India must go ahead and open source their software, because that's the biggest thing they will start to give back to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So not only should we indulge in a lot of open source, I think it's important to understand how that playbook worked for Google. Android became the largest mobile OS in the fastest possible time with the least amount of investment. And we all, as entrepreneurs, want to achieve, right? We all want to become the largest in our space, in the fastest possible time with least investment.
right.
And one of the things which they did is scale, for open source for scale. And I think that's an important learning from that playbook. The other thing which they created is the Play Store, which is the monetization layer, which is truly the data monetization layer. And And none of us, whether we are in fintech or in entertainment or in something else, that's the way to make money. And so it is very important for us to understand this playbook and try and replicate it. And it is important that not only do we replicate in a few companies in India, but we start to replicate this in very large numbers, in very large number of entrepreneurs and enterprises in the country.
Right.
That's it will bring down the cost of innovation collectively, and we will start to achieve global scale. Because the brutal reality is that yes, we have close to 40 unicorns, but we have absolutely zero when it comes to companies of global scale.
No, that's a very interesting point. I think India will get there, as in 2020 we had 11 unicorns in 1 year alone, and that was second to US. So I think India is going to lead there. But yeah, Mr. Vishnu and Shankar, open to you. Would you like to add something to this? Like, what are the key ingredients that go into having a successful startup?
There's no template, Sambhav. I wish there was, right?
Agreed.
I wish there was, and we could Google search that thing. Unfortunately, there's no template. While
Actually, it's a mix
we
of.
may say that this works, that don't work, etc. There are just two or three important things. One, you need a very good team. You can't do things alone. It's first with a good team, and second, I would say execute.
Yeah.
Once you figure that out, because none of the unicorns have any brilliant product or an innovative this thing. What we call unicorns today have a pretty humdrum model, a humdrum product which has been executed brilliantly. So I think these are the two things. Get a good team, whatever your idea is. As long as you buy into your idea, execute it well.
Executing is the key. I totally second that. Um, uh,
Yeah. So again, I mean, I echo the thoughts that there is no playbook, but there are two things in a generic sense, in a very non-visible sense, that I think is very important. One is absolutely for an entrepreneur, and to have almost superhuman determination uh, about failure, about things that don't work out, about two steps forward, one step back, and just having that gumption, that the guts, the ability to believe, and to against all odds fight it out, against all challenges, is probably one of the first thing that I rank very highly for a startup to succeed. And I think that is down not just to the entrepreneur or the leader, but also to everybody else in the team, because they're also aligning themselves, maybe in some cases leaving high paid jobs to join a startup for achieving something. And which brings me actually to the second part. What is the reason why some of the people who are in established workplaces with great amenities and great I don't know, medical insurance and safety and things like that, join a startup which is literally, maybe let's assume, not very heavily funded? I think that boils down to just one thing, which is having a great problem to solve for. I think that's not down to trying to get the most amount of value and how much money we can earn out of it, and whether we can really have a lot of money for ourselves and our investors. I think what is more important than that is actually having a great problem to solve for and disrupting the status quo in a lot of ways. Trying to believe that you're starting lean, you're starting afresh, looking at things that exist in the world and seeing if you can incrementally make it 0.1% better. Manage to do that, I think you've got a great business. Big or small is a bifactor of a lot of other things, but that's something that would get teams aligned, and that vision would get people behind you more than anything else, I guess.
Yeah, just adding to that, I think one key thing every entrepreneur needs to have is the problem solving attitude, because after a particular point of time, all you're doing is problem solving. Like once we start with solving a problem for, let's say, providing the right content to the right audience, after a point you're solving the problem for, okay, how to get the right people to build this, how to get the right acquisition strategy, how to market the product really well. So you are constantly solving different
So,
problems. So
so someone said, a business is nothing but a journey in problem solving, and I
yeah,
totally believe it.
So yeah, I think the one thing any entrepreneur needs to have is the problem solving attitude. Would like to take the last question as we are running out of time. It's for Mr. Garg. Dr. Garg, how do you see the progress of Indian government's flagship initiative, the Atal Innovation Mission for Startups?
So, platform which enables the startup ecosystem, and the key objective of the Atal Innovation System is that how do you connect the public platforms as well as the private ecosystem that exists. So I think we need many of these Atal Innovation Mission like initiatives in the country to make the startup and the deep tech startups especially need all the support from all that is possible, and Atal Innovation Mission happens to be one of them. That's
Thank, thank you, Dr. Garg. So, since I think we are out of time, so would just like to summarize. It was a really interesting panel discussion. I'd like to thank our keynote speaker, Mr. Dr. Garg, for sharing his take on the topic, and our panelists for being so candid, and uh, yeah, our audience for tuning in. So thank you everyone for joining. Had a great time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garg, Mr. Jain, Mr. Mohta,
Thank you.
Mr. Vadadi, and Mr. Sinha for being with us today. It was a truly enlightening session. I would also like to thank our customer experience partner Adobe, customer engagement partner Infobip, golden partners Freshwork and Tata Services, silver partners Reverie Language Technologies and Pillows, and bronze partners CrediWatch and InShots. Thank you so much, everyone, for sparing your time. Have a great day.
Thank
Thank you. Great talking, everyone. Cheers. Nice to meet everyone.
Cheers.